when I talk to customers, even though they bought into this, oh yeah, we put in Salesforce. How's it going? It's going horribly. Okay, well, why did you do it? Right? Like, what did you think was going to happen? And they're getting sold a story by executives and by salespeople about why it's going to work, and it just consistently fails to deliver on the promise. And yeah, not only does it fail to give them what they want in terms of the technology needed to actually build a successful B2C company, they're like, and I'm paying through the nose for it.
Hello, this is Dave Michels from Talking Points. Today I have a special guest, an amazing guest. I'm so happy to have Jeff Lawson with us, who you may know as the co-founder of Twilio, and he ran it for 16 years. So with that, welcome, Jeff. Hello, Jeff.
Thank you, Dave. Great to be here.
It is so great to see you again. I've missed you so much. Just to get some introductions out of the way for the one or two people out there who don't know who you are. Let's see. I think your illustrious career started probably with, I don't know where you actually define start, but I know you worked at Amazon in the old days. I know you were part of the StubHub infrastructure early days there as well. And you realized that the world is built on APIs, and so you created a category we now refer to as CPaaS. I don't believe that's a term you ever used once.
I hated that term. Because no customer wakes up and is like, you know what I need today? I need some CPaaS today. Like, no, they're like, I need text messaging. I need phone calls. I need to talk to my customers. But nobody wakes up being like, I need some CPaaS in my life today.
Well, yeah, I know that you never liked that term, and I think it's kind of funny because that's just what everybody just decided you have to be. So the founder of what we now call CPaaS, and when you left Twilio, I think that was in 2024, sound about right? You kind of disappeared, and everybody was kind of wondering where you were going to pop up, and it didn't take too many months to figure it out. You popped up as the owner of The Onion, the only media site that isn't afraid to tell the truth. Tell us about how that happened. How did you get to The Onion?
Well, it's funny. After I left Twilio, I just wanted to do some things that brought me joy and that were fun and things I'd been wanting to do. So, I built a car, which was a lot of fun. I just working on a lot of projects. And but one of the things that I had always joked about with friends, right? After Benioff bought Time and Bezos bought the Post, I joked with friends that, I'm going to buy The Onion because that's like the market cap equivalent for me, yep, right? Yep. Like that's like the kind of the karma of the universe. Like that's just how it ought to work. And I actually looked into it a couple of times, starting back in, 2018, but it was just like, they weren't interested in selling it. It was owned by Univision, actually, for some reason. Univision, like somebody there had some idea of what they wanted to do, and no, they weren't doing it. And then they sold it to private equity. And I remember being bummed when I heard that it got sold. I was like, what?
Yeah.
And it was owned by private equity, and they had this stupid thesis that they were going to combine The Onion with Gawk, like the remnants of Gawker Media. And then they were going to centralize things and just juice it for page views and ad clicks. And it was just swirling down the drain because they had no good thesis for how to actually do anything useful with it. And so it was in this classic death spiral, which was private equity. They want to, squeeze it for cash. So they lay off a bunch of people. The product got worse, fewer page views, less people read it, less ad impressions. They laid off more people then. And it was just death spiral. And so when in 2024, I looked into it again, and this time they were ready to sell it. And interestingly, I think they'd finally realized that they had no plan. They had no idea what they were going to do with it, and they were killing it. And in fact, it became apparent that they were going to shut it down if they did not find a buyer. And so it changed, like the whole mission changed for me from, wouldn't it be fun to own The Onion to, shit, we got to save The Onion because they're destroyed. And it had gotten very unfunny because the owners they actually dictated the creative element to the team. They said, you can only write slideshows because they generate the most clicks.
Oh my
And then they
gosh.
loaded up the page with those chum box ads, like the bottom of the barrel AI generated ads where
Yes,
it's like a
yes.
picture of of a weird AI generated like tank, and it says check out the 2027 Jeep Wrangler. And when you click on it, you're looking at ads for Viagra. You're like,
Yep.
what's going on? I don't even know what the internet is doing anymore. That's what it had become. And so we bought it. I brought in a management team who was really excited to run it. And we basically just hit the reset button. And, you've been following the things I believe in for a long time. And so, we kind of went in there and we said, hey, look, writing team, you are amazingly creative. This is an institution the world needs, but the only way we're going to survive is if we get back to basics and focus on who's the most important person in the room here, which is the reader. And if we don't focus on our customer and give them a great product, I don't even know why we should exist. And by the way, the writers were great. They wanted to do all this. They just weren't allowed to by the private equity overlords that they were working for. So we got back to basics and we said, we're going to write funny stuff and we're going to have the most basic business model in the world, which is if people like what we write, they're going to pay us. And so we launched a subscription product. And the anchor of the subscription product was, and I guess I didn't totally realize this, but in retrospect, of course, that they had killed the print paper about a decade ago.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
who wants print anymore, right? Well,
Who wants it?
turns out the Onion is funnier in print, which is a little counterintuitive. Like, well, why does the medium matter? Well, it turns out that the joke of the Onion is the juxtaposition of all of these unrelated stories next to each other. It's the president did the stupid thing next to local man did this next to the horoscope,
Yep.
next to the stupid weather, right? Like
Yes.
that is the joke. And just seeing one of those out of context in like your social media feed is
Right.
just not as funny. And so we brought back the paper, and we have a $99 a year subscription model, which is going incredibly well. In fact, we've already quintupled the revenue since I acquired it. And
Wow.
amazingly, the revenue had been in decline for many years and they were losing money, right? So they were destroying the product and they didn't even know how to make money with it. They were losing money. And so when I bought it, we just got back to basics, reader supported, and now we've quintupled the revenue and really just done some great stuff that I'm really proud of the team for having really turned around, focused on the thing that really matters, which is our readers writing funny stuff. And when we do a good job of that, they pay us. And so it's really, it's a great story. And I can't speak highly enough of the people of the Onion. Like they're such good people. I love working with them. They're obviously, as you can imagine, hilarious, but they're also just like really good hearted people. And so it's a great team and I just love it. It's a lot of fun. And I'm very hands off. Like I'm not actually involved. I'm like the owner. And one of the things that surprised me about the Onion was, it almost like a real like journalism publication. Like there is a wall between the creative and like the business side.
It is a real life journalism paper. I mean, let's be straight about this. It is a legitimate newspaper. And some of it's fiction, but it's okay. I mean, it is a legitimate paper.
Well, it's funny because we tell the truth. We just tell it in a different way.
There you go.
Than the media does, right? Like the media purports to tell the truth, but really it's full of a lot of opinion and it's full of a lot of, how would you say, cowardice in terms of like how they actually try to express what's going on in our world. And they try to, it's mealy mouthed and they kind of both sides everything, right? Like it's kind of what the mainstream media is a little bit, but the Onion, I think, and satire broadly tells the truth. It says the thing that everyone's thinking, but it says it in a way, in the form of a joke, that allows it to cut through our defenses, allows you to say it out loud.
I completely agree.
Where the like main like the media can't say these things out loud, but in satire you can because you've couched the truth in a joke, and that's the power of satire. And that's actually part of the other reason why I felt so inclined to buy the Onion is because actually the world needs this institution. The world needs satire to be telling the truth right now in a way that is more important than ever because the truth is harder to tell. And we've seen how the Trump administration has attacked the media.
Exactly.
And therefore the media has backed off. They're no longer telling the truth because they are worried about getting sued. And so it is nice to be an independent media that has nothing else to lose, right? We're not trying to merge with Viacom or something. And the other thing that is nice about it is,
You don't need
um,
FCC approval for anything.
yeah, we don't need the FCC for anything. That's nice. Um, and just the and satire has that ability to not just tell the truth, but you're almost unassailable. And I should say that as I knock on wood, right? But like the thing about like obviously the media is supposed to be protected in our country
Yeah.
from from attack. That's what the First Amendment is all about. But even we've seen that not really hold up. But the thing about satire is it's protected in a natural way, not by the law, even though it is protected by the law. It's protected by the fact that if someone attacks a satire publication, they look stupid. They look petty and idiotic if they are attacking you for a headline that makes them look stupid. Like it almost is self-defending because you can't attack satire without looking like an idiot.
The burning question, though, about publishing and the Onion is: isn't publishing dead? You went from Tom's, which was, of course, alive and well, to publishing. Explain that. I mean, I understand you needed to save the Onion, but is that a declining business model, or is that what's going on in publishing?
Well, look, we consume more media than ever, right? It's just changed. And so the question is our media going to evolve with it? Now, I don't believe, like, here's one of my things that I've come to believe about, where we kind of are in this technology cycle. There was an early belief, and early, I mean, 70s, 80s, 90s, by the technologists of that era who foresaw the coming of the internet, who were part of the creating of the internet. And I'm talking about like Steve Jobs, Stuart Brand, like this generation of technologists. And the belief was that with information becoming free, that we would all be better off. You would get rid of the gatekeepers. Bezos has famously said, the internet removes the gatekeepers and provides an equal platform for everybody to speak and to learn. And we're going to have this great renaissance of humanity. Okay. Now here we are in 2026. The great renaissance of humanity looks a hell of a lot like racism and anti-Semitism and hate and people with guns doing things. And you're like, well, it didn't quite turn out the way they thought. This isn't exactly a renaissance. What went wrong? And I think what went wrong here is it turns out that, human beings were not evolved to maintain relationships with a billion other people. We are evolved to maintain relationships with give or take 100 people. And so when we are exposed to a billion people, give or take, on the internet with all of their opinions and all of their, right, we go nuts. We can't handle it. And we start hating, we start dividing, and we start flame warring each other, right? Like that's what's happened. And then you throw in the incentive for nation states to muck with our mental state here. And you get things like TikTok and the Facebook algorithm getting gamed by actors for war for our minds. And then you throw in the profit incentive of companies to like maximize our attention. Like you throw all these things together, you don't get the utopia that was predicted. And I think that's the world that we live in right now. And so part of the pushback against the death of media is like, actually, I think there was value in having gatekeepers. I think having the professional journalists whose job it was and whose profession was based on the notion of trying to decide right from wrong, trying to have a professional standard to what they do, and knowing that they had job consequences if they did this very poorly, and that the network would have consequences if they did it poorly. Like people thinking this was an important role in our society actually had value. Now, did they get it right all the time? Of course not. But did they get it generally? Were the incentives generally aligned with the needs of society? Like, they kind of were. And so I actually think the notion that in the same way that we like kind of turn back to, vinyl and maybe print papers and, there's sort of like an irony to it and it's like a hipster thing, but there's actually some truth sitting in all of that, which is that I do think we yearn for people who are, aligned and sane to help us see truth. as opposed to having everybody having to figure it out for themselves based on a continuous feed of bullshit fed to us by algorithms. That's not healthy.
Yeah.
And we're all realizing it, right? Phone addiction and social media addiction. And, the lawsuit that just got settled with the social media companies, right? It's
Yeah.
very clear that all this stuff is not benefiting us as individuals, or I think you look around at society as society. And I may be one of the few people in Silicon Valley who actually questions whether or not humanity is better off because the internet exists. And the question is, how do you measure better off?
Yeah,
I kind of think of
exactly.
it as
Yeah.
happiness, happiness.
Yeah.
And happiness can encapsulate, can I support my family? Do I have an income? Am I content with my life? Do I feel good about the decisions I've made and the people I see, right? And if you, by many of those measures, on net. Now, people would point to, but there's so many entrepreneurs now who can sell their wares online. Like, that is true. But I think about this on net. There's worse things, there's better things, but on net, are we better? Are we happier today than we were 30 years ago? And I think the answer might very well be no.
Certainly no with social media. I don't know about the whole internet. It's a bigger question, but social media, I think, has been very negative. But
Well,
that's my take.
okay. So what is the internet? What is the internet? Wait, social media, consumption.
Yep.
It's probably the other major bucket here, like consumption, like buying things. Like, I don't know about you, I buy more shit on Amazon, like the convenience. Oh, you can, the everything store, you can buy anything. Well, it turns out, number one, then we end up with all this decision fatigue of, oh my God, I can buy any toaster in the world. Which one should I buy? And I'm going to research it. Like, who cares? We used to be, you'd walk into a store and they had 3 toasters and you picked one of them and life was fine, right? You didn't need every toaster ever made at your avail. And then the second thing is we buy way more shit than we need.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it doesn't make it feel, there's like that, you get a little rush when you buy it and the box shows up and then the hour later you're like, why did I buy this thing? Now I got to figure out where to put it. And now you're throwing it all away. And like, that's not making us happier that we have instant access to buy absolutely anything.
The reason I reached out to you, Mr. Lawson, the reason I reached out to you to have this discussion is because of something you said that has been stuck in my head. I think it was 2021, possibly 2022. And it was at Signal. I guess actually 21 Signal was virtual, so it must have been 22. But you said to me, and actually to a small group, that CRM is a $69 billion failure. Does that sound familiar to you?
I don't remember the exact words, but it sounds like something I would have said.
Okay. And you even had it explained. You explained the math. You explained that the total. This is again we have to adjust for current year. But so 2020 in 2022, you had figured out that the industry had somehow collected or raised about $70 billion in revenues at that point, and that their whole job was to deliver customer relationships for enterprises, and then you put up a stat about most customers are unsatisfied or unhappy with their relationships, and so you dismissed it as a failure.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, here's the core of my argument. There is CRM in its essence is a tool for salespeople to track their customer conversations and to track the status of sales deals. That's what CRM is. Like, that's what Salesforce was born on. That's classically what people think of as that CRM product, which is all well and good. Salespeople should have a tool to keep track of their sales deals, no doubt about it. However, somehow that got morphed into this idea that it was the tool for everything customer facing, customer related. And here's where it crosses a line into lunacy, which is it turned into, well, that's also the right tool for B2C. And you're like, no, it is absolutely not the right tool for B2C. And anybody running a B2C company knows it. But there's this myth that's just been sitting out there is like, no, this is the right tool for keeping track of things that don't have sales deals at all, that just have a customer and a statistical probability that they're going to buy something. Yes. And how do you actually talk to them in a way that helps encourage them to buy the thing that they want? The CRM had no bearing either in terms of the technology required to solve that problem, and in particularly on the pricing model of how you would go about building software to solve that problem and how you would price it These are both wildly inappropriate for the problem that B2C companies needed to solve. Yet for some reason, they convinced the world that no, this is the right solution, and you should build on us. And when I talk to customers, and again, I'm talking to a lot of B2C companies, and I didn't talk less to sales teams doing B2B, and so I know less about that. For the B2C world, when I talk to customers, even though they bought into this, oh yeah, we put in Salesforce. How's it going? It's going horribly. Okay, well, why did you do it? Right? Like, what did you think was going to happen? And they're getting sold a story by executives and by salespeople about why it's going to work, and it just consistently fails to deliver on the promise.
The basic,
And
yeah.
yeah, not only does it fail to give them what they want in terms of the technology needed to actually build a successful B2C company, they're like, and I'm paying through the nose for it. And the third bit, the total, and then this is the jab of the turning of the knife is, and I'm stuck because they have all my data and I can't get out.
The stock market has agreed with you because the CRM sector is in trouble. Now the CRM sector, the narrative is it's because of AI, and that is certainly an element of it. But I want to go back to what you're saying here. It has a long track record of not delivering on its basic promise, and so enterprises have been paying not only paying a lot for this privilege of not getting what they were promised, but even making it central to their customer lifecycle management. That the CRM is the center of all of this. I mean, they've promoted it, and so why do you think enterprises keep doing that or have been doing that?
I mean, look, the easy answer is that it's really slick marketing. Like Salesforce has world-class marketing. Mark is probably one of the best marketers on the planet. His name's literally in the word. The world-class sales, great salespeople. And when the decisions are made at the executive level, people who aren't close enough to kind of all the technology decisions, what you get is a sense of like, well, the vendors is promising me success, therefore they're on the hook to help me deliver it. I'm going to go with them. And it's the safe decision, frankly. It's the no one got fired for buying IBM. Like, it's a variation of that. Now, that's an oversimplification, and that's the easy answer, frankly. But I think it makes sense when you're like, okay, well, here's this big database in the cloud, and you kind of wrap it in the story of the cloud and all the things the cloud brings. And then you're like, oh yeah, and then we've got all these tools and an ecosystem of 100,000 companies who build on us, and therefore you can go work with any of them. Like, it's a really compelling story for why the answer that like everyone else in the industry has done is why you should do it too. And they've brilliantly built up that story over the course of 25 years.
Stock prices are going way down, and so it seems like the gig is up. Do you think that people are getting just frustrated, or is it really because AI is truly disrupting the space?
I think that there's an over rotation in the stock market, first of all. So I think people are overly concerned. And look, if a stock price today is the present value of all future profits, do I think future profits of CRM companies and software companies broadly, that are especially those that are based on a per seat basis, have been curtailed by AI? Absolutely. Right. So there is an argument that I think is true that that prices of equities today would come down because I think the full present value of all future profits has been eroded because of AI. Right. So it's not stupid. It's not crazy. Now, as much as it has been, or in the short term, are they going to deliver revenues and profits that are going to beat? And are some investors going to be like, holy shit, I it's a buy opportunity. And like, are you going to, yes, you're going to see these charts go all over the place. But the long-term thesis, I think, is correct. But I think the time frame that investors are thinking about is incorrect.
So the long-term thesis has got to be a concern for the CRM companies. And so they are pivoting. They're becoming AI companies, for one.
Sure,
You don't.
everybody has to, right?
They have becoming AI companies. We have all the agentic stuff you need from us. It comes from OpenAI. It comes from Anthropic, but you can get it from us. They're also pivoting into CCaaS. You probably saw that Salesforce announced a headless model. So there goes the desktop. I mean, so the question is it a story of a successful pivot? Is it time to pivot? Or is this an opportunity for enterprises really to say, this is the time to get out?
Call me skeptical, but I don't think that actually this pivot to headless is going to be as impactful to customers as they make it seem. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to tell you a story, actually. Early in the day, I don't know if you remember when we launched Flex, our contact center as a service product back in
I was there.
2019, I think it probably was.
Enterprise Connect.
2018, 2019, yeah, somewhere in there. One of our early customers was Lyft, the car ride sharing company. And at the time, Lyft they had all their customer service on Zendesk, and they were one of Zendesk's largest customers. I don't remember the exact number, but they probably had, 4,000 or 5,000 seats, like a huge number of seats on Zendesk. And they built on top of Flex because they needed a contact center that was more responsive, more integrated, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. Right? Here's the fascinating thing. I get an angry call. You remember Michels, the CEO and founder of Zendesk? I get an angry call from Michels one day. He's like, Jeff, what the fuck are you doing? I'm like, what? Why are you calling me? He's like, why did you tell Lyft they could go down to one seat?
Uh-oh.
I don't know what you're talking about, Michels.
I'm just the CEO. That's the other thing. I don't have.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, like Lyft says that because of Flex, they can go down to one seat and they can just use us like an API. Okay, like they don't need our UI anymore. In fact, we're just a database to them, and they can hit it with the API, and they just need one seat. So my answer to him was like, look, Michels, I don't know. I've not been in any of these conversations. I don't know what's going on. But here's the thing. If that is actually true, it seems to me like you have a business model problem. That's not my fault or Twilio's fault for telling them they could do this. Even if we did, I don't even know if we did. If they figured it out on their own, whatever, it's not my problem. It is your problem. You have a business model problem. If that is in fact the case. And that is true. Like that was an early precursor, I think, of what you're seeing now. Now, so bring it back to Salesforce headless. So if it turns out that people don't need seats anymore for Salesforce and they can just use it like an API, and Salesforce is pretending to say, this is great, this is the future, we want you. Do you really think that they're going to allow the revenue to get cut by 1,000x because of this transition? No, they'll price it differently, but you're going to pay the same. In fact, you'll probably pay more. And that is the history of what Salesforce has always done. And they will expertly figure out how to get their sales team to convince you to go. Even if you do adopt headless, you'll end up paying more. But I think the reality is most companies are like, oh no, I'm still going to be buying a bunch of these seats, but now I'm also going to be putting, whatever the headless thing actually means. Salesforce also has a great way of announcing products that don't yet exist. So I think that's probably the case here, given that the stock price decline is a relatively recent phenomenon. They had to announce something so probably they're now scrambling to go build whatever it is that they just announced. And what it really is probably going to come down to is an MCP server, which makes sense. At the end of the day, like it'll be an MCP server. They'll charge you to access it and they'll say you don't need seats. And maybe if you were starting a brand new install of Salesforce today, that would be true. But for most customers who already have a ton of seats and a ton of data, like it'll be no change. But if you want to use the MCP server, you're going to pay for that too, is the reality of what it probably will end up being. And this, by the way, this was my thesis about why Salesforce was vulnerable to somebody to come along with this notion of a headless CRM, which is why we bought Segment at Twilio, which was the notion of they can't pivot because you've innovator's dilemma. They would lose too much revenue to make this pivot, so they will protect the core business. It's just the antibodies of a big company doing what they do, right? They have to protect the revenue. They have to protect the current business. And so just because they've announced headless, I think it does indicate where the industry needs to go, but they will not be the company that will be able to do it in a way that will disrupt themselves. So somebody else can
that's exactly the point I wanted to get to, because they can do these different business models and try to maintain and grow their revenue, but ultimately the revenue is very high or their prices are very high, and alternative solutions which are going to be emerging that don't have that high cost.
It should cost less, and in fact, it should be a different feature set that is much like, I always thought it was interesting. I think one of the things I pointed out maybe in that signal setting was You know how much it cost to store a gigabyte of data on Salesforce? Do you know what the price is?
I can't. It's not cheap.
It was about $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
You know how much it costs to store a gigabyte of data on S3 is?
Right. Right. Okay.
A penny a month.
Yeah.
So when you've got that many orders of magnitude
Right.
between what some customers are doing and what other customers are doing, you know there's an opportunity to bridge that gap and create a better solution.
When you were talking about this in 22, you were pivoting toward a different type of solution at Twilio, and you were thinking there was a better way to do this. And so my question today in 2026 is, how do you feel is the better way if the enterprise can't meet its needs through CRM and they're trying to improve their customer relationship? What's the right way to go? What's the opportunity? How are you doing it at the Onion?
One of the nice things about my life right now is I have the luxury of not having to think about these things anymore. Here's what I would say. I'll tell you, the last signal that I did in the end of 2023, I envisioned what marketing would look like in the era of AI. And I think what you're seeing is those things are coming true. So what I envisioned was essentially, each part of the marketing job starts to become AI. And at the time, the only thing that was really happening was, okay, you had AI copywriters. Remember, those were like the first things to come around back then. And you're like, okay, you can have copywriting, but of course you can have graphics. But really the unlock is take an understanding of the customer, and AI can generate a unique campaign, not on a per campaign basis, but on a per customer basis. And every single day, every single person can have a custom generated marketing outreach based on the things that they're doing, everything about that customer, what they've bought in the past, what they returned, what they, how they've browsed, what they didn't buy. All these things can actually create an AI powered marketing scheme. And look, even though I decry, what social media has become, there are lessons you can learn from that, which is like AI can pretty easily discern what an individual wants or needs to hear from you, and every company can actually have that be their marketing playbook, and you don't have to pay Facebook for the privilege. Now, that's what AI would become. And I kind of said, okay, well, you're going to say, okay, create this campaign. And then you're just going to say, no, wait, like I don't need to actually create the campaign, the creative, and I don't even have to have the idea. I can say, AI, help me come up with an idea for a campaign today. And it can just automatically execute a campaign for you. And then it gets even crazier because you could say, AI, I want to make $1 million today. And it can go look at your inventory and look at where the margin is in your inventory, that if you moved it, you would make this much profit today. And then it can go figure out which customers are the highest probability to go buy those things today. And then you could go generate ads and other marketing assets to actually go move that product today if that was the goal. And so you could actually take and your AI becomes not just something that's writing copy or making images. You can literally give it your OKRs and say, hey, AI, my goals for this quarter are make this much money, move this much product, whatever. And it will figure out strategies to do those things. And I think that now you're starting to see AI move further up and up and up the stack, and in order to do higher and higher function of capabilities. But the underlying asset for all of it is essentially the understanding of a customer, the click level data about everything that they do, which is the raw resource needed to make the decisions about, well, here, how would I go talk to Dave? What should I talk to about Dave? And that's what Facebook's been doing for 20 years. How come every enterprise isn't doing the same thing? That's
not just click level data, because what you were advocating back then, you talked about the golden profile, but you also talked about conversational messaging and collecting a lot more of those real time and textual messaging, and building with this golden profile so it was always current. And you were accusing CRM of having stale data.
They don't even have the data. They literally don't. Like if I assail Sales Cloud and I say this is inappropriate for marketing, their answer would be, of course, Jeff, that's a Sales Cloud. Marketing Cloud is the B2C thing. I'm like, okay, great. Let's talk about your Marketing Cloud. Your Marketing Cloud that has like 7 fields of customization per customer. like there's custom columns in your relational database that you allow the customer to say, well, my business is unique. My custom column for this is no, like that's completely inadequate to understand what customers are doing. It's that click level, it's that behavioral data, and then synthesizing behavioral data into insights about the customer that allow you to do things. It's not about having 7 customizable columns in your relational database. That's not what a B2C level customer understanding is about.
One of the big debates in our industry right now is the future role of the human customer service agent. And the agentic solutions are getting better and better. The bots are getting better. How do you feel about the future of the human agent in customer service?
I mean, it seems inevitable to me that human agents will all but disappear. There will still be the escalation path to a human, I'm sure, but it will be needed and wanted less and less and less. And obviously, it's in everyone's interest, both the company's interest because they will save money, but also the end user's interest, which is like nobody calls a customer service line because they really want to talk to a human. They call because they had to, because somehow, automation, the website, the mobile app, whatever, they're in some corner case that was not contemplated by all the automation, and therefore they have to talk to a human. And it's kind of fascinating, actually. One of the ideas that we played around with was customer service agents, and more specifically, the software they access is an API into every enterprise. Because customer service agents have to be able to go operate and pull knobs and levers on behalf of customers that, for whatever reason, you can't pull on the website or the mobile app or whatever, right? And so if you actually trained a data set based on what are all the buttons that customer service agents push in a whole bunch of legacy ass systems, you'd actually be building the API for like the last 10% of everything that's going on inside of an enterprise.
Right.
And that would be the key to automating a lot of that stuff. And I just think that AI is getting good enough that it's clear. Now, the one thing that strikes me, and I've pitched this to so many entrepreneurs to go build this product, and I don't think anybody has yet. So I'll pitch it to your listeners, Dave, which is I think the big thing that will hold back the full automation of things like customer service, and not just customer service, but that's the example we're talking about in the agentic world, is you're going to have these scenarios where you've got an AI that can handle 95% of customer service requests. And someone's going to be chomping at the bit to deploy it because they're going to be like, look how much money we can save if we can deploy this thing. Except the thing that holds us back is we need to give access. The AI, the agent, has to be able to talk to some core mission critical system to do the job of a customer service agent. And our security team won't let that happen.
Right.
Right. And my canonical example is always the airline, right? So it's like, okay, I'm talking to an airline agent. Dave, I know you're a critic of United. I see your LinkedIn posts. You're going to talk to an agent. You're like, I need to rebook my flight. Okay, great. I'll redo that for you. And it's got to talk to some booking system. And the problem is in a deterministic system. So the legacy style of AI, of like voice or messaging bots, you're like, they're pretty predictable. You've boxed everything into a very clear outcome. They're willing to give access to those APIs to go rebook a ticket or whatever. But in the true world of LLMs, where you can open up the floodgates and be like, LLM, you can solve any problem imaginable for this customer. That's the real power. You're not putting the AI on very specific rails. In fact, that's one of the problems, I think, with the first generation of even LLM powered customer service agents is it's fascinating. The last generation of systems, they'd have these flow chart diagrams of like, okay, start, customer intent is book ticket. Okay, go this way. And then, you have these flow charts of everything that happens. And the job of the AI was to like basically figure out which, Plinko board direction you're going down this flow chart in. And so it was very limiting. It was very frustrating. Half the time, the thing you wanted wasn't in the flow chart. And so you end up getting kicked out to this human anyway. Then along came LLMs, and LLMs can reason. And you're like, okay, great. We don't need those anymore because it'll just reason over all the things it could do for you. Well, turns out nobody trusts them. So the whole, you've got like, Einstein level LLMs that are just still doing the Plinko board thing. You're like, well, what did we actually get for this? Not much, frankly. And so I think in order to unlock the true power of these LLMs, you need to get rid of the Plinko board. And you just need to say LLM solve the customer's problem. And of course, here's the guardrails and here's the instructions and the tone and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm not tying your hands. I'm telling you, go figure out what the customer's problem is and solve it like a human would.
Yeah.
And so in order to do that, now you need an unconstrained LLM given access to an internal API. And that's where the security team is like, no effing way.
Right.
And so we need a firewall layer that basically takes the full history of the conversation with that customer and the intent that the LLM wants to do. Like LLM wants to go rebook an airline ticket. Here's the whole conversation that led up to that action. Hand it to another agent and say, agent, should we allow this? And that agent is skeptical. That agent is like, hold on. I assume at every step of the way, someone's trying to attack our frontline agent, that something is trying to scam it, whatever. And it skeptically looks at the history and all the customer information and the action it wants to take and gives it a yes or no.
Yes. You want to agentize
have is like, oh, some rogue LLM is going to go book 1 million airline tickets for $1 and it's going to take down the whole airline, right, or whatever. And so you need a firewall between a customer-facing LLM that is empowered to actually go do anything needed to solve the problem with the customer within the confines of what's allowed, and then something that says yes or no to like, did this LLM go off the rails or not? It seems very clear to me that that's what's needed. And until we have that, people will be hesitant to actually let the LLM powered agents go off the rails or get out of their Plinko board. But if you still have the Plinko board, you basically don't have something that's much better than like last generation AI agents, in my opinion.
You want to use an agent to virtualize the supervisor that turns the key on the cash register. So,
yeah, we've always had these, escalation path to the manager or whatever. It's basically the AI version of that. But it's especially when you're talking about unfettered access to internal systems, that's the needed thing.
What are you say you don't have to think about this stuff anymore. So let me ask you this question. What do you today ask your developer? For those of you who don't know, Ask Your Developer is Jeff's book, and he said that all the answers come from your developer. So that never worked for Jeff before because he was a developer, but you're not the developer, you said. So what are you asking your developer these days?
It's become a very complicated time for developers. So, it actually takes me a second to think about the answer to that question. Because obviously we've all seen what's happened to coding with coding agents. We've all seen vibe coding now. I've done a bunch of these vibe coding projects. You can kick things out. They work. Are they good? No. Is it good enough? Maybe. Yes. Right. Like I actually think we're in the infancy right now of this era, which will succeed. So the transition to AI generated code, I believe undoubtedly will succeed. And the reason is there's a lot of historical precedent for it. It just takes a little more time than we have already put into it. And here's the thing that's needed, and here's why I think it'll succeed. What's needed is it started with saying, AI, I'm going to describe a product I want, you go make it for me. And so the task you've given is to make something to do a job. And that AI will come back with something that may or may not succeed at doing that job, but the user then tests it and says, no, it doesn't quite work. No, there's bugs or whatever. And then it iterate. That's what vibe coding is basically. You just keep sending it back. Do it again until you get something you like. It's not unlike management. And the thing that was frustrating about it is you had to do all these loops and you're like, how come this idiotic thing can't get it right? The second thing is if you're a developer and you poke under the hood at the code it wrote, you would be horrified. I'll tell you, I built a little stupid thing for my work. I have a workshop here in San Francisco, and I built a stupid thing where I had all these hardware devices talking to each other, and I said, add in encryption. And it was like, okay, the connections are now encrypted. And it was it took the like secret key that it was using to encrypt the communications and just added it to the URL so that's how it communicated in plain text. You're like, this is not good, right?
Right.
Hopefully production systems are not being built here this way. So you can look at it today, and this was maybe a year and a half ago, so it's evolved even a ton since then. But you look at it and be like, wow, these idiotic machines, well, we're just going to go. But the answer is clearly adversarial AI which is that you've got one AI whose job it is to make something that functionally meets the needs that you asked of it. You have another one whose job it is to validate, is it meeting those needs? You have another one whose job is to say, is this secure? You have another one whose job is to say, is this scalable? You have another one to say, is the UI accessible? And you have all these agents negotiating essentially independent interests, not unlike a company. Like that's kind of how companies work, right?
A chorus of advisors.
Yeah, sure, right. And they will come together, and through enough iterations, you'll ask it to make software that does X, and it'll go, and you will get something, and it will be functional, it'll be secure, it'll be bug free, it'll be whatever, because you just have to have something that is negotiating that process. And until we do, you'll end up with these suboptimal outcomes. But to me, there's no doubt that we will be able to engineer those systems that do that. And my answer for like, well, why do I feel like this is inevitable, is because there's an ample history for this. Now, think about when computers were programmed in assembly, and along comes the first compiler. And now you can write programs in what then was thought of, it's like English, writing in C or whatever. Like this is human language in easy to understand words, and a computer will compile them down into assembly. Now, this is a little before my time, but I imagine there were a lot of people that are like, there's no way that a program can actually write assembly. That's crazy talk. This is only people can do the fine level. Well, it turns out, of course, compilers can do this job. In fact, nobody writes assembly anymore. And then you've got the same thing happens again with interpreted languages, scripting languages, right? If we keep moving our way up the stack into simpler and simpler paradigms where we express what we want and the computer figures out how to do it, it seems clear to me that this is just the next step in that process. And so I absolutely think there's so much precedent for doing exactly this time and time again.
You were always on the front edge in what's now getting a lot of attention as consumption-based pricing. And you didn't really have a choice. I mean, that was the way a CPaaS worked. And the CCaaS industry, the CRM industry, has largely been a per seat based pricing. And you mentioned that earlier, and you think that's going to be a challenge. Do you think consumption based is the future or the past? Or some people talk about outcome based. Some people are talking about nobody seems to know right now in B2B how to price their products.
It's absolutely consumption based. I mean, that's a no-brainer. I'll tell you the thing we never got around to doing. We always wanted to. We actually wanted to productize our billing system, because we built our own billing system. Because back when we started in 2008, a real-time usage-based billing system did not exist, and so we had to build our own.
Of course.
And I'll tell you that we always wanted to release it, except we were always too busy just scaling it for our own needs to actually then go and release it as a public product, because it was the hardest thing in all of our infrastructure to scale, because it took the everything that Twilio did, calls, texts, emails, everything hit this one billing system. And so it was the most scaled system we had. Oh, and also it's, the key to our revenue. And so, it's pretty important. And it's, it can't get things wrong, because otherwise you got the SEC yelling at you. So a lot of requirements on that thing. But we had a name and everything. It was called Billio. And its tagline was, "We can't wait to see what you build." See what we did there? See that?
All right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's usage based. It's usage based pricing, because seats don't make any sense. I mean, back in 2023, right, when the early signs of AI coming about, it was like clear that anybody with a per seat pricing model was going to suffer, because two reasons. Number one is a lot of the software will be obviated. You just don't need it anymore.
Yep.
And the second is because instead of humans, you're going to have agents doing a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you don't need seats for the agents, now there'll be some people who try to say, oh, it's a virtual seat for your virtual. You're like, no, of course, that's not going to be the permanent solution. If I have one agent that can hold 1 million simultaneous conversations, what is that? One seat? Is that 1 million seats? Like, neither of these things make sense. No, it's clearly going to be some form of usage based.
It's even worse than that, because a lot of the vendors are using OpenAI or Anthropic or whoever. Their costs are usage based. And so it's very hard to give a customer a fixed price if your costs
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, this is one of the interesting things. I always thought we were really well set up to take advantage of this because two reasons. Number one, we'd spent 16 years building usage based systems, right? Where we had to manage our margins, we had to manage customers, we had to real time bill, because if you get it wrong and you're not doing it in real time, you can get really screwed really quickly. You have to deal with fraud vectors, you have to deal with all these things. And we had to get really good at all those things with a usage based model that we were billing customers and a usage based cost structure that we then had. And the second thing is, if you're a software company, fat and happy with your 85% gross margins, but now suddenly you're paying tokens to these LLMs and eating into your margins. We were already accustomed to a 50 some percent gross margin business. We were
yeah,
already valued as such. We had no innovator's dilemma. We could go whole hog into providing services with an expensive token cost structure, but probably still do just as well, if not better, than we were doing with messaging and voice and all this other stuff, because
yeah.
we were already built a company based on this model.
And okay, well, that brings me to this. This is a good question to follow here. You've been through a lot of tech eras, right? You went through the internet, you went through the cloud, you went through SaaS. I guess that's the cloud. We're going through another one with AI. This is the first time in a while that you are viewing it from the sidelines. So how has your views changed? What are you thinking about the tech sector right now? Are you ready to come back? Because I know some CCaaS companies that could use you. What's going through your head? This is a pretty big tech revolution going on, and you're on this is the first time you're out.
I've been out before, by the way. Like, I started a skate shop, and I was watching the tech industry in the early 2000s from the outside. I was doing stuff, but I wasn't like in Silicon Valley anymore. And so there's been a few eras. What I think about, I think about this era a few things. Number one is I am so. By the way, you asked about the Onion earlier. The other thing I'm doing is I've started and I am running a fusion energy company. So we are a spin out from Lawrence Livermore National Lab, the only experiment that has ever created energy, net energy from fusion. Fusion is the way to create energy of taking light atoms like hydrogen, and under conditions of hundreds of millions of degrees, getting those hydrogen atoms to fuse into helium and giving off a ton of energy in the process. That's how the sun works. And humanity has tried. It's the holy grail of energy. It's clean, it's
Yep.
safe, it's cheap, it's abundant. The only problem is it's never worked here on Earth in a way that created net energy until this experiment at Lawrence Livermore National Lab in 2022 succeeded at making it work. And so what we're working on is, my co-founder is the lead designer of that experiment from Lawrence Livermore. And we've licensed all the IP from Lawrence Livermore. And now we're going and doing a commercial scale up of that technique to try to make commercial fusion energy work. And, I say all this because personally, I always like learning new things. When we started Twilio, if you think about it, the real reason we started Twilio was because we didn't know anything about telecom. I didn't know the first thing about telecom. That was why we started the company, because literally I wanted it and I had no idea how to make it work. And finally we're like, let's just start the company and figure it out. And I bet there's a lot of other people like us who actually, if they had access to this, would want it, but have no idea how any of it works. And so I love, we built a REST API in 2008 that a lot of people were like, oh my God, this is the best REST API ever. I just read the O'Reilly book about REST APIs and designed the API. Right? I just love learning new things, and that's what's
Yep.
exciting for me. And so when I thought about what I was going to do next, I was like, well, I could start another software company or even an AI company in the software world. But in some ways, I'm like, I just spent 16 years doing that. That what would I be trying to recreate something that I already did? And startups being what they are, probability adjusted, you're probably going to fail. I'm probably going to do worse, right? So I'm just not interested in that. I'm interested in learning something new and tackling a new challenge. And so for me, that's the Onion, it's fusion energy, it's stuff like that. And so I'm enjoying looking at it from the outside, just because it's nice to learn a new thing. But second is, I do think that when you look at the cycles, the hype cycles, right? The hype cycles are getting, taller and compressed, right? And so the speed and the height of this hype cycle is so intense that to me, some people, maybe that's really exciting. For me, being an entrepreneur and trying to build a durable, long-term company in an era where products are obviated on months cycles because Anthropic just did the thing, right? And now you're like screwed. You're like, I like to wait until the dust settles a little bit because I think that's where the real opportunities are often more apparent. And I think you saw that in the dot-com era. Obviously, they had all the hype and all the money and all the whatever, and then it all crashed, and then the real companies emerged. And the good ideas survived, and the better ideas came about after the hype cycle died. And it wasn't just about the BS and who could raise the most money and who could have the fastest IPOs and all this kind of stuff. Now, it's obviously playing out different this time around. This time around, it is playing out in terms of private capital, not public. It is playing out in terms of GPUs and data center buildouts and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of debate. I think we're overbuilding our data centers, personally. I think there will be a reckoning. I am happy to be studying this from the sideline. And I think that the better ideas and the better companies are going to emerge after a lot of this shakes out. So I'm happy to not be starting a company or running an AI company right now because it's a very confusing time. Like, I empathize with leaders who are trying to navigate this. Like my friends, Scott and Mike, who started Atlassian. Like, Atlassian is, you talk about Salesforce. Atlassian's trading at like a 90% discount from where they were a few years ago because the market is so turned on this idea that human beings are going to work together, and that's what their software enables. And I empathize with, like, how do you deal with that? You're like, no, the short-term revenues are actually going to be strong. Now in the long term, is that a trend? Maybe, but you have to lead that company today. And you have to figure out, how am I going to motivate employees today when our stock price is off 90% from where it was a few years ago? And we have to continue building for our customers today. And our customers have needs today that aren't a pure AI product. No, they still need the Atlassian products today. And so it is a really hard time to be running a company. And, sadly, the answer a lot of these folks are coming to is, okay, well, I got to do what the market wants. So let me go lay off 40% of the company and blame AI for it and say everything is amazing because AI is replaced. Like, no, nobody buys that. It's not.
They do buy it. The stock goes right up.
Sure. That's the standard answer, but it's not the right long-term answer for these companies. Like, laying off 40% of your workforce does not enable you to actually go build for the future, does not enable you to go to invest in product that is going to be the product your customers want from you 10 years from now. Yep. That's not really possible to do that. Now, there are some efficiencies getting gained by AI, sure, but it's not what, it's not justified by these layoffs.
All right. Well, Jeff, I can't thank you enough for taking time to talk to me about CRM, and so good to catch up with you. I love The Onion, and I love it even more knowing a little more of that backstory. So keep up the great work.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dave.